the fight that everyone thought was nonsense just a few months ago, the fight that no one was really sure was ever going to happen, maybe even a few weeks ago, is now a thing. Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor are fighting in a boxing match August 26th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It's really happening. It was announced today by both men. There was a conference call with Dana White, Leonard Ellerbe, and Steven Espinoza from Showtime. It's all very surreal, and we're going to talk about it with you guys right now. I'm Marc Raimondi, here with Esther, Lynn, and Jed Meshew via Skype from Atlanta, Georgia. We're in the Panda Dojo in Los Angeles, and we're still kind of digesting all of this information that we got today because it is very strange. A UFC champion who has no professional boxing experience will be fighting Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. Mayweather of a 49-0 record and regarded as perhaps the best fighter of all time, certainly in the conversation for best boxers of all time. It's actually going to go down this summer. It's not even that far away.
No.
The promotion has already kicked off. It's almost crazy that I'm actually speaking these words right now. Esther, are you surprised that this is actually happening?
I'm not actually surprised. So I thought actually the moment Ronda lost in January, or I guess December, was it December?
Late December, yeah.
December 30th. I thought this opened the door for that fight to happen. So.
Because the UFC lost someone who was a proven draw.
So the UFC lost one of their draws and their hugest stars, so they thought, well, something else big has to happen for them to have another banner year, so this is that big thing.
It's such a crazy thing because, as you said, the UFC and Dana White, they were kind of lukewarm about this. I know that certainly they didn't want McGregor to go out and do it on his own because they are his promoter. They still have him under contract, and somehow the UFC and McGregor came to this, their side of the deal. And when Dana White announced that the side of the deal with McGregor and the UFC was done, everyone kind of laughed at that and said, well, that's great. That was the easy part. Now you have to go and negotiate with Floyd Mayweather. But that really wasn't that long ago. And now Floyd Mayweather's side is signed on. Showtime is releasing official fight posters, and it's all happening so quickly. Jed, I know you were a guy, I'm not really sure how to talk to you here, but I know you were a guy who was very skeptical about this fight ever going down. Even I remember talking to you a few weeks ago about this. Are you shocked right now?
I am stunned. A part of me still says they're not in the ring yet, so maybe hold our expectations because you never know what'll happen. But I am flabbergasted. I did not expect it, and the thing that really has caught me the most is the speed. And you were kind of talking about it earlier. This unfolded so rapidly. Even when Dana White said, "Hey, I've wrapped up my dealings with Conor. Now I'm on to dealing with Mayweather." I didn't give it any credence. It's like, okay, well, you've done that. Mayweather's going to be the hard part. Mayweather has been a notoriously difficult negotiator for his whole career, especially once he's had the upper hand. It took Manny Pacquiao, who, I would have thought, honestly, until today, I thought Manny Pacquiao would have had more leverage than Conor McGregor to create a negotiation like this. And it still took him, 5 years to get a deal signed with Mayweather. It took him to lose to do it. And this unfolded almost instantaneously. Just a couple of weeks ago, he said, hey, I'm going to start trying. And now, whether Dana had any hand in it or not, I know that's up for debate. Still, it got done very quickly. I'm surprised by that.
Esther, what do you think about that? Because you have a kind of an intimate knowledge of Mayweather and Showtime. You've shot Mayweather countless times. You work for Showtime. Mayweather's not the easiest guy to negotiate with. He's tough, notoriously. Are you kind of that's sort of an unintended pun there? Were you surprised about how quickly it all came together?
Okay, so I'm not actually surprised at how quickly it came together because even though the Mayweather-Pacquiao negotiations, let's just say they took a very long time, once they actually got to the point where they were, the fated time they saw each other on the basketball court at the Heat game, it's just saying that once that happened, everything unfolded super fast because I believe that was like in March. We had our first press conference in April, and then a month later was the fight. Like, that's how quickly it happened. I remember being called like 4 or 5 days before the press conference came together, and they're like, we need everybody you've got in LA. We need all these, we need all, whatever tell us what you need for your cameras, all the access. We need to start working on credentials right now. I mean, it became really fast, rapid. We had to get a lot of work done. All of a sudden, I had to clear my entire schedule, and I had probably gone back and forth to Vegas like 6 times between the time that they announced the fight and the time the fight actually happened. So it was fast. Like once it got announced, it was, or once they started hinting that it was going to happen again, like they started talking about it.
Yeah.
Because before that, there wasn't actually any talk about it. Mayweather was like, oh, you know, I would like to get to 49-0, blah, blah, blah. He had his other fights, but no one was really thinking about what was next for him. And then all of a sudden, it was like, I think this Pacquiao fight's going to finally happen, and then it just happens.
Jed, I wanted to ask you, like, the company line today during the conference call that you know, all 3 executives, promoters, what have you, were saying was that this was the fight that the fans demanded, and I think there's some truth to that, but I also think that that's a little bit of a promotional ploy as well. Certainly there's an interest in this fight, and I think some of the interest is kind of like the WTF, like why, you know, a boxer versus an MMA fighter. Why do you think this fight is even a thing?
Man, that's a really tough one for me to answer. I do think you're right. I think there's a little column A, a little column B here. I think that there is certainly some fan interest. I also think that, you know, we might bear a lot of the responsibility here, we collectively in the media, to create this as a narrative and a storyline. You know, we didn't create it. I don't even remember who the first one to throw a shot was. Maybe Floyd Mayweather called out Conor McGregor like over a year ago. That seems to be my recollection. But, you know, it's a story that has a natural kind of narrative to it that we can sell, that people are interested in talking about the story at the very least, if not so much interested in the fight. I've seen a lot both ways of fans being like, hey, Conor's going to win, or this is something I'm interested in. I've also seen a lot of people that sort of have the idea that this is an enormous mismatch, but is a spectacle worth watching. And I think that the spectacle is really the hook as far as kind of a tying line between all of the parties here. I have no real interest in watching the fight itself, but I have a tremendous amount of interest in watching the next, 60, however many days it is, unfold.
Do you think, Esther, that the mainstream, I mean, both sports kind of are niche sports in a way. They don't always cross over to the mainstream. Only the big fights really bring it out.
Right.
And this, I guess, is kind of the ultimate big fight, the ultimate crossover mainstream fight. Is it really for more of the mainstream fans than it is for the fans who watch every UFC fight night and watch every, showbox card?
Absolutely. This is going to be another one of those cases. I remember when Mayweather Pacquiao happened, the Boxing Writers Association was upset at how hard it was to get a credential at that point, because every mainstream media outlet wanted it, and they didn't have enough room, so they had to build a tent outside so that they could spread all hundreds of media that had showed up. But the problem is that someone said this, and I think this is probably true. This is the boxing match for people who don't like boxing. So,
that's a good point, because it's between a boxer and someone who's not a boxer.
Right, and I think it has that same fascination, more appeal actually, because you might say that Conor is still in his prime, whereas most people felt like Pacquiao had passed his prime already when they finally got to match up. You have this rising sport against the established sport. There's so many things going for it that I think there's a lot of mainstream attention. And just from my friends who don't follow the sport at all, they've all asked me about it. And they've been asking me about it as if it's going to happen. You hear it. You hear people kind of talking about it randomly, and you're like, really? You guys are interested in this? And people are interested.
I was talking to my mom today on the phone, and I mean, she does not follow any combat sport whatsoever, unless I post it on Facebook. And she actually even asked me about the fight, and I said, they might announce the fight today. And he's like, oh wow, I've heard about that. That kind of blew me away, because it really is capturing that mainstream appeal. But the question, I mean, outside of the promotion and the lead up, everyone knows that there's going to be spectacle. There's going to be that mainstream attention. I found it interesting the way that they've begun promoting the fight. The company line today on the conference call was kind of what Dana White has been saying. Conor McGregor has, he's got a lot of power. He's the younger man. He is a southpaw. That kind of thing. He brings it every time. I mean, we all have heard that before. And I think that's fine. And even Leonard Ellerbe was touting McGregor today. Mayweather, even in interviews, has been touting McGregor and building up McGregor. Is there another way to promote this fight, Jed? Because I mean, I think anyone who follows either sport knows what this fight is. They know it's more of a spectacle than an actual real fight. But how does, I mean, obviously the promoters still have to do their job. They can't sell it like, hey, yeah, you guys watch this. It's probably gonna be a blowout. They have to say something. So is this the way that you would do it, or would you do it a different way?
I think this is the way you have to do it because you're right. People who follow either or both sports, they know how things are likely to unfold here, but that's not who they're trying to appeal to. This is their goals here are astronomical. There's been conversations that this passes Mayweather Pacquiao, which did like 4.5 million pay-per-view buys. Over I think it did $600 million in revenue. They're shooting for the moon here. And so they're not trying to get, the hardcore or the average boxing fan. They're trying to get your mom and my mom and, just the average sports fan, the person who's going to tune into SportsCenter and see, oh, this is a big deal. This is a big event. I guess I should tune in for it. And I think that's the way you market to that category. And to a degree, I think it's working. Like, I got a ton of text messages today from friends being like, hey, this is really happening? Like, that's going to be awesome. And I didn't want to ruin, rain on their parade, but I think it's the right way to market it. It's going to be a tough pill for us to swallow, the people in, these spaces, because we know that it's mostly garbage. But I think it's fine. It makes sense to me.
My mom asked me about the fight too.
Yeah.
She's been asking me about it for I want to say 2 weeks ago when we were in Brazil. My mom texted me out of the blue and asked me if the fight was happening. And I was like, I'm in Brazil right now, but I think so.
So funny. It's been about 4 years since McGregor has been in the UFC, since he kind of came onto the scene, and it's almost like every time we talk about McGregor, it's we're talking about him doing something that no one thought he could do, something that he maybe said he was going to do, and now he's done it, and we're here. And I feel like today is another day where that's happening. McGregor said it a year ago, almost, that he was gonna fight, Mayweather. Win, lose, or draw, whatever happens in the fight with McGregor, he's going to make a ton of money, and he's going to do something that no one has ever done. I mean, the UFC has agreed to support him in this fight, and Dana White was very careful to say that they are not a promoter for this fight, that Showtime is handling the promotion and the distribution, which I thought was interesting. But obviously, there's no deal for a fight without the UFC getting on board.
Right.
Does it? I mean, you've been covering the sport for a really long time, Esther. To see what McGregor has done over the last few years, and kind of the things that he's made seem mundane and almost regular, or never happened before. I mean, what is it about this guy that continues to keep pushing the envelope and allowing these things to happen and these doors to open?
Oh man!
Don't say The Secret. It's not the book. Don't say it's not just
I would
self-belief.
just say his audacity
Yeah.
and his willingness to make a fool of himself and keep trying. He just keeps.
But why does he have that audacity? Because of The Secret, Marc.
He just keeps saying these things and putting it out there and making people talk about them. And this is not to say that it materializes out of thin air. He puts these thoughts in everyone's heads. He just leaks out a thing. He'll say something casually. Whatever catches on, oh, this is catching on, then you just keep repeating it. You keep repeating it until people keep repeating it. And then all of a sudden it's everywhere. And he has that power. He has that amazing ability to just keep manifesting stuff by asking people to think about it constantly.
I guess in a way, he's kind of like the ultimate combat sports personality, because he combines what I think is undoubtedly a fantastic ability to fight with just over-the-top charisma, and more than that, just that self-awareness, right? I mean, he says these things, and it does appear that he means them, and he does believe these things, but he also is very self-aware in everything that he's doing, and nothing is by mistake with McGregor. Everything is kind of by design. Do you agree with that, Jed? And I want to ask you the same thing I asked Esther. What has allowed him to do this? Because it really is something that we've never seen before. I mean, we're talking about a fight between a 49-0 boxer against an 0-0 boxer. That can only be pulled off by someone like Conor McGregor.
Yeah, man, it's incredibly impressive. You can do nothing but, you may not like Conor McGregor, but you have to respect what he has accomplished, at the very least outside of the cage. Even if you are a person who wants to detract his in-cage accomplishments for some unknown reason, like what he has managed to achieve here it's truly remarkable. I like to think I'm about as cynical as possible in this sport, or pretty close to it, and I had no expectation this fight was ever going to happen. And he sort of willed it into existence. I thought Esther called onto something good there. He just kind of throws out things or, mentions things, and then if he sees that there's any type of interest or any type of momentum to be gained from it, then he just drains it for all it's worth. And he built this kind of throwaway, oh, I'll fight Floyd Mayweather, I'll box him, I don't care, into this thing that's going to get him paid. He is going to make so much money here. And it's just because, it's like you said, he's a star. He has that, force of personality that I think in any type of show business related endeavor, he likely would have been successful. And it manifests itself in the best ways in the combat sports arena. Like he is built to do this. And so it is not surprising on one hand that this happened, but on the other hand, it's still incredible because, MMA is still a young sport. It's not that long ago that we were talking about, well, MMA is, oh man, it's on Spike TV. That's a big coup. Now the biggest MMA star is going to do one of the biggest sporting things of the past decade. Like it's impressive, and you have to respect it.
He is kind of like the 2017 like ultimate polished carnival barker, like the 2017 2K version of the carnival barker. Max Holloway said something very interesting on Ariel Helwani's show, the MMA Hour, on Monday. He said, everybody else is playing checkers and I'm playing chess. And I thought to myself, like, that may be true. And I think Max Holloway is a fantastic fighter, but if Holloway's playing chess, not only to put down Holloway, what is Conor McGregor playing? Like, what game is he playing? Because he's not thinking the same way that these other fighters are, for better or worse. You may not like it, and I completely understand not liking it, but it seems like his goal and his idea of achievement in combat sports differs greatly from how 99% of fighters feel. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I don't think he's actually necessarily even thinks that he's playing a game. I think he is planning and strategizing as if life was war, if that makes sense. He also seems like he's extremely deliberate. Like everything he does, he's thought about a lot and has dreamed of the day he could do it. Every day that passes, you're like, there was some point a couple years ago when Conor was like, I hope one day I get to do this, and then he gets to do it. And I feel like he keeps, we talk about like a lot of fighters talk about visualization or whatever, but he wants all these things and keeps working towards them. So yeah, it's not the secret. He obviously keeps working towards it, but like you have to, you do have to actually want these things too. You do have to want to be able to be able
secret.
To be able to handle the immense attention that this is going to require, because it's going to require a lot of attention, and it just kind of an immense ego. You have to really. You got to be a little delusional to think that everybody cares about you that much that they're going to pay $100 to see you fight someone in a sport you've never done.
There's kind of a fine line between crazy and genius, right?
Right.
Jed, there's another really big, it's funny that I'm saying another boxing match. We're talking about boxing here, and Conor McGregor. It still is not, I'm still not quite there yet in wrapping my brain around this, but there's a fantastic boxing match in September between Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. That was the date, it's September 16th, right, I believe. That was the date that McGregor and Mayweather wanted. It's not the one they're going to get. Instead, they're going to go before. They're going to be August 26th, which is only a few weeks before. Does that hurt that card, do you think Jed? It's a great boxing match, but doesn't have the kind of mainstream, hook that, Mayweather and McGregor have.
I think it definitely hurts that card. And I think it would be foolish of us not to believe that date was in the mind of Conor McGregor and the mind of Floyd Mayweather and the money team in Showtime Boxing when they kind of expedited this negotiation. I think we all thought before the Triple G Canelo fight was announced, that weekend has been a Mayweather weekend for the last X amount of years that he was competing. He always would compete in that weekend or around Cinco de Mayo, just because it was optimal time to increase his maximum amount of pay-per-view revenue. But when that got snatched up, Dana White was on. I forget who did the interview with him when that fight was announced. He's like, yeah, they took the weekend we were targeting, and I think Showtime Boxing got back at HBO and said, okay, you guys want to do that? We're going to take a dig, and we're going to take some of the wind out of your sails, because you're right in that these fights appeal in general to different fan bases. I will say that I think everybody who's buying Canelo Triple G likely also going to buy Mayweather McGregor, just because it's one of the best boxers ever. Even if he's fighting me, like, they're still going to watch it because they respect the craft, and it's an enormous spectacle. But I do think you're going to lose some of that casual fan who, without the Mayweather-McGregor fight, the casual fan would only know that, okay, the big fight coming up at this point is Triple G Canelo. I don't watch a lot of boxing, but this is the fight to watch. I got to tune in. Now they're going to have, at the very least, the Mayweather-McGregor fight that they're going to tune in for, and then maybe they'll still be like, okay, yeah, I want to watch this next one that's coming up a month later too. But depending on how that fight unfolds, depending on a lot of variables, just price point entry, like, this pay-per-view is going to be over $100. I don't know what the Canelo Triple G fight is, but not everybody can afford to drop, $100 every month to watch people punch each other in the head. So I think it's going to take some of the wind out of the sails there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we talked about McGregor and why he's doing that and what kind of motivates him. What motivates Floyd Mayweather, Esther, do you think? Because he's 49-0. He's made more money in his career than he'll ever be able to spend in his lifetime. Right. Most people would agree with that. Why does he? I mean, there is. I don't want to say it's a lose-lose for him, but at best, of course, he makes a boatload of money. But unless he absolutely just tears through McGregor quickly, if McGregor even lingers for a few rounds, people are going to say, like, oh, why Floyd couldn't finish a guy who's 0-0 as a boxer in the first round. There's an element of a lose-lose in it for him, even though he's making a ton of money. What do you think? Why is he doing this?
Well, he would like to go 50-0. And what better way to go 50-0 than against a guy that's 0-0?
True.
I mean, it almost seems guaranteed, right?
Kind of.
If you kind of look at the numbers, it just makes sense. Like, it seems like, well, obviously he's going to win. And there's that tantalizing risk. There's the perception that there's risk. But
when there isn't really.
When there isn't. Risk. Right. But at the same time, I also think that this is fun and there's legacy. I mean, he wrestled Big Show. I mean,
he did wrestle Big Show.
So
he won that, right?
I really think that Mayweather, like McGregor, they're all up for putting on a show, and why not? I mean, what's left for him to do as a retired man, right? He does have a ton of money, and he also makes a great deal of money in other ventures, and he doesn't need to fight anymore, but he also has children, he's got families and people that he'd like to support, and why not? I mean, also, he's young. 40 years old is very young to be done doing things. So
your sorry to interrupt. Yes, Jed?
It's Durant to the Warriors. It's some people are going to hate that analogy, but it is the easiest path to the most success. He is going to get paid in a major way, 9 figures, bare minimum, multiple 9 figures likely, for what seems like it's going to be the easiest boxing match of his entire career. He gets to go, past Rocky Marciano's 49-0 record. And to your point about, the risk here, there is some risk in general, but do we really think Floyd Mayweather cares? I mean, he's been dealing with criticism most of his career about how he spent the bulk of his prime ducking the best opposition he could have faced, and that he was extremely calculated. I think the only thing he cares about is that number that's in his bank account when he wakes up every day. And this is going to get him closer to $1 billion with a B. It doesn't actually. This fight may, in actuality, put him over the $1 billion mark as far as earnings, depending on how well it does, I think. Yeah. So, totally makes sense for him to want to do this. It's just a great opportunity for him.
Who doesn't want to be part of the 3 Comma Club?
I sure would. It's funny you said that, Jed, because about Mayweather having the reputation of kind of ducking the tough fights in his career, because you could probably say that McGregor, I mean, that is a criticism that people have had of McGregor, where he's not defending his title against the top contenders. He's jumping around to different divisions, taking super fights. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about this, Esther. You have this ticket from Mayweather-Pacquiao from that fight, and it cost a pretty penny. It cost a little bit.
It's a row R, section 10 ticket, so that's not very close. I believe it's in the first, like the lower bowl, right? So right when the seats start to come up, and it's $7,500. This was a gift from Showtime to me after I worked the fight, so which I love very much. But I'm always just amazed at how much it costs to get in that building.
It's a crazy thing, and you know what? It's gonna be, this one's at T-Mobile Arena, but I'm sure it's gonna be full, and I'm sure the gate is going to be outrageous. Maybe not as much as Mayweather-Pacquiao, but it'll certainly do well. Before we go, we'll take a few questions. You guys down for a few questions from Facebook Live, from the people?
Do it.
From the people.
Esther, that's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, I've got some really interesting swag from that event. There's a lot of weird stuff.
It's quite the event.
Yeah. It was one of the few, just like, generally, I would say, like, for fights, credentials are not the hardest to copy or whatever. But this one was actually one of the few where it was electronic. We had to scan in and out every time we left the building. Security was very, very tight, which I'm glad for, because it was a circus. The entire week, everywhere you went, I'm really excited for you guys to experience this, and I hope you get to experience it. But like, I walked around Vegas, I think like maybe Wednesday or Thursday night at 2 a.m. I was just curious. We just went walking down the street. I'm just like, who's interested? And you could hear, as all the way on the other side of the strip, people were talking about the fight. Just people were just walking up and down the streets, just partying for this Mayweather-Pacquiao. So I feel like this is going to be even crazier because you've got the Irish contingent and Mayweather fans, which are from everywhere. It's going to be really, really interesting.
Do you think this guys? You think this fight is bigger than Maypac?
I don't think so, but I mean, I don't know. I've seen estimations that think that it's going to do better. I read something about the T-Mobile Arena being able to seat more, so maybe we'll do a bigger gate. I honestly have no idea. My gut reaction said that this wouldn't do anywhere near that number, but my gut reaction also said this would never ever happen. So what do I know?
Casey, yes. Questions.
What do we expect from the undercard? Do we expect a horrible undercard, or do we expect something actually a bit worthwhile?
That's a good question.
Well, generally, I would say you'll actually have a pretty decent undercard. What was I saying? I think
Mayweather wants some of his guys on the card.
Yeah,
like
Mayweather will
Gervonta
definitely have a couple guys on the undercard. You'll get to see some good boxing talent. Gervonta Davis is really amazing. Everyone's hoping for a couple more MMA.
I don't
boxer matchups,
imagine that would happen.
But I don't think that will go over very well.
No.
Why not?
The only one that would make sense would be Anderson Silva, Roy Jones Jr., just for funsies.
I just can't imagine, like, the UFC, they didn't have to do this with McGregor. They really didn't have to do it, and of course they're going to make a lot of money on it, but it's because it's that fight.
Yeah.
They don't stand to make a ton of money doing Stipe Miocic versus Anthony Joshua right now, or Jimmy Manuwa versus David Haye, as you know, both these, both those fights are kind of being bandied about, but
there's no reason to dilute the purses as well. When people are going to buy it regardless. The other thing is that generally boxing shows don't have as many undercards anyway. I think for the Mayweather-Pacquiao we had like 2 fights on the broadcast.
On the main card, right?
So, and because they're long too, these are 12-round bouts. They're not. You're not trying to fill up a night with like 12 fights. I think there were like 5 undercard fights. They were all good. I think Lomachenko was on the undercard, and I was very disappointed that nobody was as excited for that fight as I was. But it's just it doesn't matter. Especially once you're in the venue, you'll realize. Like, I remember during the Lomachenko fight in the MGM Grand, people were talking. you could hear people just chattering and talking.
Not watching the fight.
Not watching an amazing fight unfolding in front of their eyes. And that's how it's going to be, because it's going to be, I mean, think about the kind of people that will be able to afford a ticket to this event. You're going to have to be wealthy. Last time there was, one of the funny things that happened that weekend was there was a jam up at the airport because there were too many private airplanes flying in.
Tough life. Struggle is real. So I mean, it's almost one of those things where, as a fighter, you want to be on the undercard because you will get maximum exposure in a way. Right. You'll have the eyes on you, but will the people really be there? They certainly won't be there for you, but will they even remember your fight after the huge spectacle that is a Mayweather-McGregor? Maybe not.
Maybe not, but you'd have to think that there's going to be one or two guys that are going to show up that day that you're going to remember. I think
hope so.
I mean, or just, I guess it'll end up being trivia to who was on the undercard.
What else we got, Casey?
How do you feel about Showtime basically running the broadcast? And basically, we're going to get a boxing type broadcast. We're not going to get a UFC broadcast. Is this a positive or negative for the overall experience, you think?
I think it's good.
Yeah. Does this mean we're not going to get a face the pain intro?
That would be very good. I think that I appreciate the way that boxing production is done, because the UFC certainly has a very pro-UFC bent to it, and they don't talk about things like drug testing and failed drug tests and controversial things on their broadcast. They just don't do it as a rule. I don't like it. I don't appreciate it. I think that there should be more openness on broadcast. I understand why they don't do it, I guess, but I feel like full disclosure is important. And in boxing, it doesn't happen that way. Showtime and HBO and the production they do, I think, is very honest. I like the way that they talk about things like judging and refereeing, and they talk about some of the more controversial storylines around the fight. So I'm welcome to that kind of thing. I asked you guys this: dream broadcast booth for this fight. What do you think? What if you had to pick from anyone, who's alive, anyone who to do this fight on the broadcast booth, play-by-play, color, analyst, who would you choose? Esther, start with you.
I'd like to see Morrow work this fight.
Yeah.
I think he could bring the proper amount of excitement to this bout.
Excuse me. Jeez, had to sneeze. How about would you I mean, part of me thinks that Morrow and like Joe Rogan would kind of be cool. I don't know. I mean, just to have the boxing and have the MMA, even though Morrow is every combat sport. What do you think, Jed? What would be like your ideal? What's your dream team to do this?
I'd like Morrow on it because, like you said, Morrow's done it all. Morrow's done every combat sport you can do. I think, look, this is the mixed martial arts fight, and so frankly, I don't really want any of the traditional MMA commentary teams that we've been accustomed to on it. Like, that's not for me. I have a lot of respect for most of those. I mean, all of those guys anyway. And I think that, if you gave John Anik the call, I think he'd do a fine job. But I really like HBO's commentary team in general. I've always liked Max Kellerman's work. I wouldn't want it to be entirely that, because there is another bend to it. There is the underlying part of this being a mixed martial arts fighter competing. So I think if you kind of blended that, or just had Morrow, I think having Morrow there will be really the most important thing, because he can at least play a lens into the other side, and then you can just have a traditional boxing commentary team, and Morrow can kind of chip away if they're trying to get a little too anti-MMA at it. But I'm not even sure Morrow's going to be on the call, which to me is a really bad idea. But it sort of sounded like from the press conference that he wouldn't be involved. I hope that's incorrect, because I think he is the perfect man for the job, and you surround him with any other, the regular Showtime boxing team is very competent. I prefer the HBO boxing team. Obviously, that's not going to happen, though.
How about Mauro Ranallo, Max Kellerman, Brian Stann? What do you think?
That sounds like a good combination.
Yeah.
I like Brian Stann on any team.
It's a pipe dream. It won't happen. But hey, why not? Any other questions, Casey?
I was going to add one more thing about the thing we were talking about, the boxing broadcast. The thing I love the most about boxing broadcasts in terms of their honesty is that my favorite little feature is when they tell you all of the judges
Mm-hmm.
that are judging a fight and their last 5 decisions,
Yep.
including and any of their questionable decisions.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And I think that's very important. They like to tell you everything about who's
Yep.
watching this fight.
More accountability is definitely a good thing
Right.
to have it. It's one thing for us to write about it and us to cover it on MMAfighting.com, but for it to actually be on the broadcast,
Yes.
what the past 5 fights, controversial decisions for a judge. I think that's great. I think it's good.
Yeah, and also the refs, they'll tell you what are the major fights this ref has overseen.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think these are important things and help give context to anybody watching a fight.
Right, because it is a 360-degree production. It's not just the fighters. There are other elements at play that dictate the fight in many ways.
And selfishly, I really like the lighting at boxing shows.
Sure.
They go all out, and there's like accent lighting. It's like a whole different thing. They light the crowd. There's more likelihood of there being just like a ridiculous spectacle thing happening, like the fireworks with
Right.
Anthony Joshua's fight, the crazy flaming AJ letters. I mean,
Yeah.
there's more of an opportunity for that kind of stuff. I mean, all of Mayweather's walkouts have been just bonkers. I was there when he
Burger
had
King coming out with Burger King.
Burger King.
Yeah.
I was there when he had the circus acts come out. I was there when they threw like tons of money in there with his face printed on it. I mean, there's a bunch of opportunity here for
Sure.
some really fun stuff. And I would say that sometimes you're not going to get that with the UFC because they're definitely more concerned with being consistent and delivering a consistent product rather than maybe making something special.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, Casey, I think we can. We do have one last question.
This is kind of just a. Hear me out. Coming into the fight, is this Mayweather McGregor booking? Is it good or bad for boxing, and is it good or bad for MMA?
Awful.
It's wow. Okay,
Awful for who?
Jed obviously has a strong opinion about this.
I do. I don't think it's bad for boxing. I think it's bad for, as we already discussed, I think it's bad for the Canelo Triple G fight. And I guess you could then argue that as a corollary, it's bad for boxing. I don't think it's bad for boxing. I mean, it does really nothing for boxing. Because for the most part, anybody who really is aware at all will just go, hey, look, the best boxer beat a guy who's not a boxer. That's really unsurprising. I don't think it's bad for MMA for similar reasons, but I do think it's really bad for MMA because I am extremely convinced that Conor McGregor will not come back to the sport. I think that this is likely to be his last combat sports endeavor. He's gonna cash out, and as well he should. There's no judgment on me. I think that's a great choice for him to do. It was part of the reason I was so surprised that it happened. I think the UFC and Dana White have at least some inkling that McGregor is probably done. And I don't see why does he come back to this sport? That's my thing. He is about to make more money than he could make in 10 fights in the UFC in one night. And regardless, win or lose, we talked about, he's very deliberate. He is very self-aware. He tweeted years ago, get in, get out, get paid, and that's it. There's no better way for him to go out. Okay, I achieved everything in mixed martial arts. I was the first guy to ever hold 2 belts in the UFC at the same time. Then I crossed over. Everybody said I couldn't do it. I boxed Floyd Mayweather. Sure, I lost, but I got paid, and now I'm done. He has tremendous opportunities awaiting him outside the cage where he doesn't take head trauma for a living. I think he's done, and because he is the biggest star in the sport, and we saw last year, I think we can say pretty definitively, the difference between last year for the sport and this year so far, the sport has been so stark because he hasn't been active, because he hasn't really been involved in the conversation beyond a talking point that's far away. The sport needs him now in a way that, it's pretty reliant on him in a lot of ways, and so I think it's just a bad booking for the UFC because it's about to lose its biggest star.
Should be noted that Dana White did say today on ESPN, I think on the conference call also, that Conor McGregor told him that he actually wants to turn around and fight again in the UFC this year before the year is up, win or lose in the Mayweather fight. He wants to fight again and defend his lightweight title. Now he may be saying that now. We're not really sure what will happen, but that is what they're saying. Do you agree with Jed at all?
Yeah, so originally I thought that there was no way he'd come back to the sport, but then I thought, well, the only way the UFC would let him do this is if he signed something or agreed to at least one more fight. Because what's the point if if the UFC doesn't bank on the kind of fame he'll get from this exposure? So I feel like he might fight one more time, although not a particularly emphatic way to end your career, to go from boxing Floyd Mayweather to then, I don't know, if he ends up losing his lightweight title or whatever. That doesn't seem as interesting of a way to go out than even just losing to Floyd Mayweather if he loses.
Doesn't seem like a very Conor McGregor thing to do.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It seems way more impressive for him to just go out on top no matter what that top is. But, so I don't know. When Dana said that he was definitely going to fight again this year, I was like, oh, okay.
That's the thing with McGregor, though. Like, he's never defended a belt in his entire career. He won 2 belts in Cage Warriors, never defended, transitioned to the UFC, never defended his featherweight championship, has yet to defend his lightweight championship, and it's because he is always chasing the next big thing. He wants the next big accomplishment. And is it really as exciting to go back and fight Tony Ferguson as it is to fight Floyd Mayweather in boxing? Like, I honestly think the only way he competes in combat again is if he somehow beats Mayweather and then he boxes again, because at that point now he's the biggest draw in boxing. He can fight Canelo or something and do another $100 million boxing event. I can't see him coming back because it is such a letdown. Maybe he comes back and fights Tyron Woodley. Like, maybe. It just seems so out of character for him to take a step back, essentially.
How about John Cena? What do you think? All right, we'll end it. We'll end it on.
That's more likely. That's more likely that he transitions into like the WWE or something, follows Brock Lesnar's path.
All right, we'll end it on that note. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We'll have plenty more coverage on this huge Mayweather-McGregor fight on MMAfighting.com all week, and from now really until August 26th. Of course, it'll be kind of dialed into that fight. Not totally. I know we don't want to drive you guys crazy, but of course we'll be on top of it. For Esther, for Jed in the box here, I'm Marc. We'll see you soon.